criticizing them or speaking anyway about what they are doing wrong. We just, well, you are who you are, but what I'm feeling is this, and what I need is this. It's focusing on what is going on in me rather than our judgment of him. There's in you statements, we are judging the other person, and that puts him immediately in the defensive role. When we make I statements, he may also go into defensive role because people are very defensive. They've been criticized a lot in their lives, and they're very fearful. And there's nothing magical about this. It doesn't work 100%. But certainly, there's less possibility of creating this fear in the other person when we come towards him with an I message and not with a you message. And the second technique is called active listening, in which we learn to listen more actively and ask questions which help that person to externalize himself even more clearly, and helps us to understand more clearly what is going on inside of him. Now, before we go on to how those two tools are used, let's talk a bit about how people communicate today. One means of communication is non-communication, that is, suppression. Many people, especially women, especially in this area of the world, have been programmed not to express needs, not to express desires or feelings, to suppress them. So one means of communication is suppression. I don't tell the other person what I'm feeling. I don't externalize what my needs are, and I wait for the other person to know. And then I become unhappy when this other person is not responding to needs which I have not expressed very clearly. I have not made it very clear that this bothers me, or that I would like to have this, or I have certain needs, whatever that may be. When those are not expressed very clearly, what is the result? First of all, it's very clear that suppressed emotions create illness. All kinds of rheumatic problems, arthritic problems, cancer, headaches, hormonal problems, colitis, ulcers. All of these psychosomatic illnesses are created by negative emotions which are causing a restriction of energy flow in the body, a disturbance in the hormones, and the suppression of the functioning of the immunological system. That is, the defense system of the body is weakened by these unexpressed emotions. So the body is just ready for illness. It could be inflammations, it could be cancerous cells, it could be various types of problems, disturbances in the body. Secondly, it's a disturbance in the mind. The mind is never really relaxed. This is sitting in the subconscious, this feeling of hurt, this feeling of injustice, this feeling of not being satisfied, of not being respected, of not being loved. These feelings are in there, and they're working in the subconscious, and they're occupying a great deal of the subconscious mind. So there's less creativity, less peace of mind, less clarity in our daily functioning. Another result is that all of our feelings are actually transmitted to the other person anyway. This is the effect of two connected containers. That is, if I have a container here and a container here, and there's a pipe which is connecting them, and there's water, if I push the water down in this container, it comes up in the other. So if I am one container, and my wife is another container, or my friend, or my child, or my mother, whatever I suppress in myself is actually transmitted to the other person when there's a close relationship. And that person is receiving those messages subconsciously and is reacting to us in response to what we're really feeling, and not in response to the mask that we're wearing. And so then we feel double injustice. That is, We've been suppressing ourselves. We haven't been asking for what we need. The other person is reacting not to that, but to the resentment which is building up within us, and the anger which is building up within us. And we feel a second injustice by the fact that after all of this sacrifice, this person is still not treating us well. But he's just reflecting, or she is just reflecting, our real suppressed emotions, which are being mirrored in our relationships. That all our relationships are mirrors of what we are feeling. And those emotions are transmitted. So we don't really gain anything. In fact, some of the people who teach about effective communication use the example of the brown stamps that they used to have in America. That every time you bought something, you collected a certain number of stamps. I think they have it in Martinopolis here too. You get coupons, and then when you've got enough coupons, you get the reward. You know, and so some people just collect stamps every time this injustice takes place. And when you've got enough coupons, then you can just explode on the other person with all of this anger. I mean, this is the reward, and the other guy doesn't know what's happening. What is this reaction? It's completely disproportionate to what I've done at this moment, and he doesn't know that I've been accumulating these stamps for 2 or 3 months by all of these small things that are happening that I don't mention, and I don't explain. So I'm just gathering a lot of negativity. The other person feels that injustice is being done to him because he feels that our reactions are out of proportion to what he's doing, and everyone's unhappy. It would be much easier to mention all of those little events one by one when they happen rather than to accumulate. So this type of person, the one who suppresses himself, in a way is expecting the other person to know our needs, our feelings, our beliefs, our desires, what bothers us, what doesn't bother us. And the other person is in his own world. He's been brought up in another family. He's has different programming, different beliefs, different needs. What bothers us doesn't bother him. Perhaps what bothers him doesn't bother us. And he has no way of knowing unless we explain it. He also may be very tired. He also may have a lot of problems, which doesn't allow him or her the possibility of thinking about what may be going on in us. In order for you to think about other persons, you've got to be rather happy, rather satisfied. I mean, you have to have solved quite a few of your own problems. Otherwise, you're living in your own world, surrounded by your own problems, and the needs of other persons are not important to you. It may be egotistical, but it's very natural. And it's the way most of humanity lives, because most of humanity has not solved their own personal problems. People live within their own. So we expect these persons to be mind readers in a certain way. But why do we suppress emotions? When we were children, we expressed our emotions rather freely. At some point, however, we got the message that this is not acceptable, and that we became vulnerable, and that this sensitivity or this vulnerability was something which other people may have used to hurt us. After being hurt a number of times by being open, by expressing needs and seeing that those needs are not fulfilled, that other people do not care if I have those needs or those feelings, we stop. So one is the fear of rejection. The fear that if I express this need, that I need your love, or I need your affection, or I need your time, and there's not a positive reaction, I'll feel rejected. I'll feel my self-worth being diminished. Another fear is that I will come into conflict. That is, if I express what I really want in this situation, I'll come into conflict, and I don't want conflict. And what has happened is that we have associated any form of confrontation or difference of needs with conflict. That is, in our mind, if we both have different needs, it means conflict, because we have not learned confrontation skills. We have not learned how to approach another person with different needs or disagreeing with what he is doing without that becoming a conflict. But one thing is confrontation, that is, I want to respect the other person, I want both of us to be happy, but I want to respect my own needs in this situation. And another thing is conflict, in which we both have negative feelings and we function from those negative feelings. So we can confront without conflict. Of course, it all depends on what the other person is going to do and how many buttons he starts pushing on us, in us, as to whether we start getting caught up in that negativity. But it is possible for someone to confront an issue without getting caught into this vicious circle of negativity. Sometimes we don't communicate because we fear that we will lose control. That we may get totally angry, totally upset. Or we may not communicate it sometimes because we're afraid of hurting the other person. So, for various reasons, either a fear of rejection or a fear of conflict, I would say, are the most important ones here. We tend to suppress what is really going on in ourselves and hide it from others. And they cannot then respond to that. The second way of communicating is an aggressive, demanding way in which we demand that other persons satisfy our needs. This is usually done in an aggressive way, often with language which intimidates or criticizes or demeans the other person, often with raised voice, and so that we manage to create enough fear in the other person that he will accommodate our needs. Now, you can do this with your children to a certain age, and then the role is reversed, and they start doing it for the rest of their life. Or a husband may do that to his wife for a long period of time, until, as they say in Greek, she brings her head up, and decides that she has her own needs and desires. So you can do this for a certain length of time with certain persons. But that person is accumulating resentment. That person in some way is going to sabotage that which you're demanding. You can do it through illness, through her own or his own depression, through non-cooperation. There are various ways. If this person cannot fight aggressively, he will find other ways of playing this power game. This is a power game. Whose power is greater? Whose needs are going to be satisfied in this situation? When we function in this way, except for the fact that we are destroying any possibility of real communication with this person, because this person is just going to close themselves off into a shell gradually, and at some point either explode onto us or leave, or just stay in this dead relationship for the rest of our lives. I think the most important thing is that we don't grow, because a person who believes that others are responsible for his happiness never take responsibility for their happiness. And so they take this easy solution. I'm not happy, you're to blame. And they just blame the other person. And they don't ever have the need then to do any kind of inner work, which means to look at themselves and what am I doing here? What am I doing which is causing me to be unhappy, or causing this person not to be able to give me what I need? So I think the worst thing about this situation is that we solve our problems by just saying that everyone else is to blame for our unhappiness, and then we just rest on that, and then there's no need to analyze, to grow, to evolve as a person. So this course, this 6 sessions, is about a third possibility: non-suppression and non-aggression. It's about respecting ourselves and respecting the other. As I mentioned earlier, the basis is love for ourselves and for the other. And there are three techniques, three tools. It's self-analysis, that is to know what are my needs. And often we know our needs only superficially. That is, I want this person to do this particular act. But actually behind that is a need for recognition, a need for affirmation. So I have to get clear I may see only my needs superficially, and if I just go to that person, I want you to do this, that's just a command. He may not understand why, but when I say, I need that in order to understand you love me, or that you care for me, it's a whole different thing. But we can't say that because we're afraid that makes us open and vulnerable and weak, and that we may be hurt by being so honest about our needs, which we consider to be weaknesses. We've been programmed by a society, especially in Northern European and American societies, where such vulnerable emotions are considered weakness, rather than some kind of honesty or strength. So first is the analysis. Next is learning how to express that through an iMessage. And third is learning how to listen. So let's discuss the iMessages. Okay. Today we're going to discuss two types of iMessages. The first is the declarative iMessage. There are 4 types of iMessages. It doesn't really matter into which category your iMessage falls. It's not important. We just separate them in order to understand the situations in which we will use iMessages. So today we're going to discuss declarative iMessages and responsive iMessages. Declarative iMessages are messages which we give in simple situations in which there is no serious problem. In a few weeks we will learn the confrontive iMessages and the preventive iMessages, which have to do with situations in which we see a problem coming, or already we're in full war with someone and we want to see what we can do about it. So the declarative iMessage is simply expressing simple needs. I would like to go to the movies, rather than waiting for the other to think about it. Or I would like to go for a walk, or I would like some help. Or I prefer not to do that, something that we usually do. Rather than suppressing myself continuously in all of my personal and social relationships, very simply, with the simplicity of a small child who has not yet learned all of these complicated games that adults play, and they just say what they wanted, what they don't want, so clearly and innocently. In that same way, you see, although we have programmed to go out this evening, I'm very tired. Rather than going out with that tiredness and that resentment that I have to go out and then to be unhappy and to interpret the whole evening as a disaster and how miserable all that was, speaking the truth. So the declarative iMessage, to think about various needs or beliefs or feelings or desires which sometimes we tend not to communicate to the persons around us, and that may end up in our developing in a certain amount of resentment or doing things that we don't want to do, which don't fulfill us. So that's one type of message. Now, in an iMessage, there are, what do we communicate? We communicate, first of all, our feelings. It's important. We have learned to communicate beliefs only. And beliefs, your beliefs may be totally different from my beliefs. We can always disagree on beliefs. And no one can say who is right. Because every person's belief system is his own private property, and there's no one who knows who is right and who is wrong. Everyone believes that he is right and the others are wrong. So will never find common ground just speaking about beliefs. But when I say, regardless of my beliefs, I feel resentment when you do that. My beliefs may be wrong. They may be completely illogical. I may be paranoid at this point. But that particular act makes me feel these emotions. Then he understands. There's nothing he can say. You understand what I mean? That is, we all have common emotions. The emotions that we have are 20, 30 emotions. Beliefs are millions. And so we may never, when I explain my emotions to the other person, then I touch him. But the problem is that we usually just talk about what he's doing wrong and never explain that I have fear. I am being hurt. I have anger. But we just focus on what the other person is doing. That's a you message. And that makes him defensive. He doesn't hear anything. So the first and most important thing in an I message is our feelings, our emotions. Now I remember when I first heard about this system was when I was teaching in Beirut. I was 24 years, well, it was about 25 years ago. I was teaching at a high school, and we were learning it in the context of the students. And the person that was giving us the course asked us to write our emotions. And I didn't know any of my emotions at all. I mean, I just could not identify my emotions. I was completely out of touch. So it's not so easy. I mean, I knew that I wasn't feeling well, but I didn't know what was that emotion. Was it fear? Was it jealousy? Was it anger? Was it disappointment? Was it bitterness? I mean, it's something which I had never thought about and never looked into. And so it's not so simple. I mean, it takes some time. Some person has to start working on seeing what do I actually feel? What is that called? Except feeling badly. What is that called? What do I feel when you're doing that? That's important to help the other person understand me and to be open. Secondly, to communicate our needs, our emotions, our needs. Now, emotions, don't get the idea that we're interested in expressing only negative emotions. I also realized that I was totally blocked in expressing positive emotions. It was very difficult for me to say to a woman, I love you. Or to say to persons how much I respect them or appreciate them or care for them. So an I message is not just saying to someone what problem I have with them or what needs I have. It's also learning to express the positive emotions that we have towards the persons in our life who we take it for granted that they know it, but they need to hear it. Just as they take it for granted that we know it, but that we need to hear it. That we're all really these little children who need to hear it. We know it, we see the acts perhaps, but we always doubt it. We always doubt whether the other person cares, whether he respects us. And I mean, because we doubt ourselves, we learn to doubt ourselves. And as many times as we hear it, after a few days or a few hours, we need to hear it again. And so it's learning also to express the positive things. Thirdly, our beliefs. It is useful to also explain our beliefs, but in the context also of our emotions and our needs. And fourthly, our reactions. Because the persons who have regular contact with us see our reactions and interpret them in their own context. This brings to mind the classic example that I witnessed in a couple married for about 45 years, in which when they were together at parties or any kind of social gathering, every time the man would start speaking about some subject, he was into philosophical things, he would start speaking about, or politics, whatever it may be. His wife would make this sound, and after 40 years in my office here, as we were doing effective communication, he brought up, I'm really upset with you. Because every time we go out together, you make this sound, and you're not agreeing with me, and you're making me feel very uncomfortable in front of these people. And after 40 years, she says, I make that sound when I agree with you. And I've seen so many of these situations in which people come and they say, well, he's doing this, and we interpret completely differently what is going on in the other person. I mean, we're all actually very paranoid. I mean, we all have so many fears and so much self-doubt that we interpret so many things that other people do as they don't love me. I've seen that so many people come up to me and say, well, you don't love me, do you? Because you did that. And it was the furthest thing from my mind. And I've seen it in myself, interpreting other people's action in that way. And when I go confront them, they were just in their own world. It had nothing to do with me, what they were doing. And I interpreted it out of my own lack of self-respect, that this person, because he's doing this, I'm the center of the world. He's doing this because he doesn't love me. So it is important to explain our reactions, why we react in the way that we react in these various situations. So there are 4 things, basic things that we want to express: our emotions, our needs, our beliefs, and our reactions. But of course, in order to explain those, we have to understand them and to help analyze them to a certain degree. So for next week, what I would like you to do is to write down. It's easier in the beginning to write these messages, and then we can share them in the group afterwards and see where we're getting off the track, whether it's clear or not, what we have failed to express in that message. Often we disguise you messages in an I message, with a wolf in sheep's clothing. That is it. We start it with an I, but then we just turn it around and it's a big accusation, you know. Often we disguise a command in an I message. You know, we're just telling someone what they must do, and that's not an I message. So it is good to practice these things. It is good to write them down in the beginning, bring them, look at them, so that we can. It's not easy. It's so easy to fall back into these old patterns of communication. We've seen our parents do it. We've seen teachers do it. We've seen everyone communicate in a different way, and it's not so easy to learn this. The responsive I message. Let's talk about that. The responsive I message we need to frequently give when someone asks something of us. They may ask us for money to lend them. They might ask us to take care of their children or their dog, or they may ask us to go out to eat together, or for them to come to our house, or us to them, to lend them something. Every time someone asks us something, we are in a position in which we need to give an I message. We have to say yes or no, or maybe. And why? That's a responsive I message. Now, it's very frequent in our social relationships that we have difficulty saying no when actually we don't want to do what we're being asked. There are also some situations in which people have difficulty saying yes because they're in the role of the rebellious one, of the person, of the adolescent or the person who doesn't want it to be known that he agrees with other person. So some people get caught up in saying no even when they would like to say yes. But many more people get caught up into saying yes when actually they would prefer not to do or to give or to respond to that. Now, what are the reasons why we say yes when actually we feel no? One is a desire for approval. I mean, it was very clear in our childhood years that we did not get the same response when we said yes and when we said no to our parents. I mean, if we said yes, then we were very good children, and if we said no, we were not good children, and we did not receive the same love. And so that programming has gone in, and we're definitely programmed that saying no does not sustain the love of other persons, that they will stop loving us. They will stop caring for us. They may even reject us. And may even, if we received punishment frequently as a child for saying no, we may even be expecting some kind of punishment, if not from this person, from God. Because I'm not a good person. So there's the fear of rejection, fear of losing love, fear of punishment also. These may be subconscious. These may be deep within us. Perhaps guilt that if I don't say yes, I'm not a good person. A good person would say yes in every situation, regardless of its cost to us. We may say yes in some situations in which we believe that we will need this person in the future. He may have some position, may have some power, and so it's good to have this person in some way obliged to us. We may already be obliged to that person. So even though we don't want to do what he's asking, we feel that, well, since he has helped us, I don't want to do it, but I must do it. In this case, we already feel obliged. We may say yes to certain persons because we put them in the role of authority. We see that frequently here in our morning keys. Someone may ask someone to do something, and they say no, and I pass by and ask the same person to do it, and he says yes, which doesn't make me happy in any way. I would be much happier if they respected each other as much as they respect me. So, we'll give one response to one person to whom we give a certain position in our mind, and another response to another person who we haven't given that position in our mind. We may say yes when we feel no out of a sense of duty also. Or we may be playing the role of the martyr, of the victim. And there are certain people who get into that role and they thrive on being used. And they thrive on sacrifice. But it's not real sacrifice, because real sacrifice is done with love and happiness. It's a sacrifice of a person who is being done injustice. And every time an injustice is done, in a sense, there's this whole thing about being the victim, because the victim is right, because the abuser is wrong. So as long as I am the victim, I am worthy. You understand the psychology here? Because if I am the victim, that means that the other person is doing something wrong, so I'm right and he's wrong. And so some people get caught up in that role and they thrive on being used. Now, don't get me wrong. I am for saying yes. I am for living for other persons. And my personal philosophy in life has been to reduce my personal needs as much as possible in order to be available to the needs of other persons. But there are certain situations in which we need to say no. And we have to be able to say that when that is our truth. Now, each of us will have to find his own balance in that. There's no formula, but there's some questions that I will present to you now that you may want to ask yourselves. That which the other person asks, first of all, is he asking me to do anything which is against my belief system or my value system? That's a very important question. That I'm not forced to do something. He doesn't ask me to tell lies, for example, or to cheat, or to steal. So in those situations where what this person is asking me is against my ethical belief system, I would need to communicate to him that, I love you, I care for you, this relationship is important to me, but you're putting me in a very difficult situation because I won't be able to live with myself if I do that. I have a conflict of conscience. So there are times when we may have to say no for that reason. A second situation is when we see, after a period of time, after we've given a chance to enough chances to a person, that he is actually, I can't find the English word, volevete. How do we say that in English?
Comfort.
No. In a way, he's being irresponsible. I can't find a very clear English word. I didn't consider it. It means that he's just sort of resting on our energy. He's very comfortable, and we are taking care of him, and he's not taking responsibility for his life. And he may be a child of 30 years old who's still asking for money. He may be still asking for us to support him. And so he is resting on our energy, and this is not helping him. I mean, you have the situation when someone is an alcoholic or has gotten into narcotics or has a problem. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this. This person has a problem, but we're not helping this person when we allow them to stay in this state. So that's another question. That which this person is asking for, will it really help him? Or would it actually do him harm, allowing him actually to go deeper into a state of depression or lack of self-respect? And I've seen this frequently. There's a love-hate or dependency-hate relationship is created, because when someone is dependent on someone and believes that he cannot live without that person, no matter how much that other person gives to him, he starts hating that person. Because that person is actually destroying his self-worth, his self-respect. He believes that he must have this money or this support from the other person, but every time he takes that, he's saying, I'm not worthy. I cannot do it by myself. And rather than having gratitude towards the other person, he usually has anger or hatred even. Thirdly, I need to ask whether that which this other person is asking whether it's going to be in any way detrimental to the health and the happiness and the security of myself and my family, the people for whom I'm responsible. So as much as possible, I personally believe in doing whatever we can for other persons. But when that does not go through our screening process, and we feel that I cannot do this, or I don't want to do this, or it's not important what this person is actually asking, we need to be able to learn to say no. In other cases, we need to be able to learn to say yes. But in a responsive I message, we always say why. No, because of this. My reason is this. I have this problem. I fear that by giving you this, I'm actually harming you. Or it's against my ethical belief system. Or I just don't have the energy. I would love to do it. You are important to me. But you're finding me in a phase of my life where I just don't have. And I hope that you will not feel hurt, and I hope that you will not feel that I don't love you. But I cannot do this at this point. I'm not in a state in which I can give you what you're asking. We need to be able to give that and explain why. But also, we need also to be able to get free of fears and defense mechanisms which cause us to say no, when actually in us we would like to be able to respond with a yes. Because often we get into the role of the reactory person, the person who's always reacting negatively, and we say automatically no when actually we would like to say yes. So I would like you for next week also to think about 3 responsive I messages. Think of 3 things that you may have been asked in the past, or that you may be asked during the week, and especially things for which you find difficulty, or persons to whom you have difficulty saying the truth. I'm not saying no. Saying the truth. The truth is yes, or the truth is no, and why. What I often find is that I need to explain to the other person that I am in conflict, What is my conflict? My conflict is that I care for that person. I would like to be able to accommodate him, but I have other needs at this moment, or responsibilities, which don't allow me, and I need to explain that I have a conflict. On the one hand this, on the one hand that. And at this point, I choose this. That's important, because when we don't explain that to the other person, he just says, well, he doesn't care about me. I mean, I saw that in myself this last year when I started analyzing myself, because I understood something which happened perhaps when I was 2 or 3 years old, which caused me to create the thought form that when someone does not give me what I ask, they don't love me. Most people have this thought form. That is, if you loved me, you would give me what I want. And this is not true. I mean, we may love someone very much, but not be able to give them what they're asking them at this point. It may be impossible. We may not have the space. We may not be in the condition to give it. So most people have made this connection, to the degree that some parents believe that if this child loved me, he would become a doctor. And he wouldn't become an artist. I mean, he just doesn't love me. Or he would marry this person and not marry that person. So he doesn't love me. It's ridiculous when you hear it, but many people their minds work in this way, that if this person loved me, he would live his life in this way. So far the mind goes in this kind of thing. So for next week, I would like you to have written 3 declarative I messages and 3 responsive I messages, so that we can look at them, work with them, and see how they can be improved. Because it's not so easy as it may appear. Any questions about today's discussion, about this explanation, this introduction to effective communication? Any questions? Okay. So how we will proceed is that after each explanation, the explanations will be about so long, between 40 minutes and an hour. We'll break we'll make one small group probably, because we're very few people. And we will practice what we learn. We'll practice these various kinds of I messages. So we can close the video and the cassettes. I think that because we're a small group, let's establish the hours of the group. I think we can say that if we're going to start at 5, I will probably